Hello and welcome back to the Better Opinion, where our opinions are the best ones. This is another attempt, once again, to get things working correctly. My name is Kevin. This is my co-host Mansor. Mansor, how you doing today, bud?
I'm doing fine. How are you guys doing?
I'm good, and we've got Michael over on the controls, and we've got a guest here. If you'd like to introduce them.
This is Umid. You will not see him.
You won't see him. He's off screen. He's just here to see what we're doing and getting up to, but just gives that much more importance, more audience, right? More, it's a one live viewer and not instead of the one recorded viewer.
Yeah, we don't care about Mike. He's not.
Yeah. All right. So, what do you want to talk about today?
I was interested in languages because we've talked a lot about how people are becoming more connected and how we're starting to see more of what happens at the other side of the world more instantly.
That's sort of like instant connection to places that are ridiculously far away.
But we still have multiple different languages for different countries.
Right.
And while a lot of different places accept that are learning English to help communicate with us, that doesn't mean that everyone knows English.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty common in most countries for anyone who is above, the most basic level of interaction to learn English as a second language. Mm-hmm. In the West, it's not super common to learn any other language. Maybe sometimes Spanish, they teach it in the high schools, but how many people remember it, right? Like I took Spanish, I passed. I can make an order at Chipotle to the lady who barely speaks English and she gets it, but,
I passed Spanish 3 times.
Right. Do you remember any Spanish?
No.
Habla español?
No, I have no idea.
I can remember meme phrases, But yeah, language is interesting. So what about language do you want to touch on exactly?
Languages are in their inception are an invented thing. Mm-hmm. They're kind of meant for people to communicate with each other over time, and as time has gone on, English in itself is not, it's considered a romantic language, but it's more of a Frankenstein of many different languages.
Especially American English.
American English, yeah, it's like Germanic, there's French, there's
we use words from almost every language and people don't even realize it. We use Japanese words, we use Spanish words, we use German words, we use French words, and we don't even, and it's commonplace. I mean, people put cuisine on every fucking restaurant sign, right? So yeah, that's true. It is very much a Frankenstein.
And I find it interesting because I remember like trying to read Canterbury Tales. It's a very different type of English.
Oh, distinctly different.
It's a very different type of English, but it's still English. So as things progress, will we continue using English, or will we create a new Frankenstein because of how things are progressing?
I think it's inevitable as people are interconnected that eventually they're going to adopt a language that lets them communicate. Mm-hmm. That language is probably just going to become, a lot of sci-fi, they try to depict some sort of like combined language. You'll often see characters who intermix Spanish and English. I think it's somewhat inevitable. Some people want to say one language is going to go, when China was on the rise economically, people are saying, oh, Mandarin's going to become the next, and well, that didn't happen. Mm-hmm. And now China's economy is collapsing. So, I think that English is so widely adopted that it's going to stick around. What I don't think you're going to get is that weird Spanglish that appears in movies where the character just like weirdly throws in a phrase that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in the context of the language. When I hear my I don't even want to say ESL, but just like friends who grew up with two languages speak to their parents, they will flip-flop between languages based on which one best describes what they're trying to say. But it's never so weird. It doesn't feel interconnected. It's like they'll finish a thought in a language and then the next thought will be expressed in the other language. Yep. It won't just be, 3 Spanish words thrown in the middle of an English sentence, or just adding puta at the end of for some reason because the character's sassy.
Yeah, because I also have parents who are multilingual, and our guest does, but he will not be speaking because he's not allowed to.
Is he not allowed to? I don't know.
He could, but I don't think he wants to.
Very good. Great.
But yeah, my parents both speak 2 languages. They're not the greatest at it's like they have some problems with written English, but they know enough written English that they're able to enough like spoken English to get by, and they know how to write emails and that sort of
Right.
stuff.
So what is Arabic? Arabic in English?
Farsi.
Farsi. I in my head I thought Farsi as well, and I was like, it's one or the other. I don't know which.
Yeah, it's interesting because there is multiple versions.
Oh yeah, I know. I've had multiple friends whose family spoke Farsi.
Farsi is a more Persian version of the language, but yeah. Umid can interject if I'm wrong because he actually knows more about the language than I do.
He's not going to.
He's not gonna. It's fine.
I can say something if you want.
Yeah, can you answer the question on that?
Yeah, like you can explain it. Go ahead.
So, Arabic and Farsi are from 2 completely different language families, and so that's like the big picture. Many people want you to know, right? Especially Farsi speakers. You look at the people, they really want to not
Be associated with.
It's not just even they don't want to be associated. They really want their own identity, their own distinct identity. So they will stress that fact. No, we speak Farsi, not Arabic. Completely different. Now, the truth is grammar and syntax, all that, yeah, completely different. But at least to people in the West, they use the same, almost the exact same vocabulary. So it looks similar to us, at least in writing. And there is an insane amount of shared vocab. You could compare it honestly to English and French.
Yeah. There's a lot of languages like that actually that, you have that. A lot of shared vocabulary. I think when we talk about language, and thank you for explaining that to us. I think we talk about language. You can go endlessly into it, right? One of the things that I think has come to an interesting sort of front and center societal position is the way we use language and what matters in languages because of the internet, right? So you have all these people from different cultures and different beliefs, because it used to be, we talked about this in a past episode, but for the sake of sort of setting the picture, it used to be that everyone in an area or an environment kind of conformed, right? They may be at opposite extremes of the same cultural sphere, right? There were understandings. And if you were outside of that, i.e. the joke we talked about the toaster fucker, right? If you like to fuck toasters, that was something you just kept to yourself. Now on the internet, you can go somewhere and find the subreddit for toaster fucking where everyone discusses the best toasters for fucking, right? And you can just feel that that's normal. Let me just finish the thought. So what is my point here is that now that people are interconnected to this degree, you have conflicts of ideas based off of the use of language. So what language you're using, the way you're using it, what words you're using, people are conflicting, right? They have different ideas of what language means and what's right and what's wrong. And they make up these sort of rhetorical arguments based around, it's kind of like a good one is whenever someone says, you can't be racist towards blank. So people online will say you can't be racist towards white people. By definition, you can be. Yeah. Right? The word racism has a meaning, and your personal morals have absolutely no effect on that fact. But people will argue that because in their sphere for a long time, this is an argument they made to justify their behavior. Right? Whereas in another social group, right, for a long time, they had different justifications for their behavior. And so they ignored these definitions for the sake of that. Now those people interact, and you see it online all the time as they argue with each other.
I think it's also quite interesting because even in American English, since if you go from state to state, there's like entirely different cultures.
Oh, yeah. For
and
sure.
they also speak. They have different slang.
Oh, yeah.
So you will see people surprised by people who will, in a different state, sound completely different.
Go to Boston.
Yeah.
You know, we live in Virginia, dox ourselves. Go to Boston and talk to some people. It's very different.
Yeah.
Bostonians are really cool, by the way. I love Boston, actually, other than how cold it is. But that is a perfect example of, like, completely different slang, rhetoric, accent.
And when you talk to people, it's like some people don't realize they have an accent.
No, they would have no clue if they are surrounded by the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, no one else from outside of their sort of cultural group, accent group is ever there to point it out, so they wouldn't know.
And I kind of find that interesting because math also has kind of different languages. Like you've gone through like calculus, algebra,
Unfortunately,
and that sort of
yeah.
stuff. But there's also one different one which is called proofs. I don't know if you've ever encountered them.
I know of it, but I'm not a math guy. So.
I'm going to be very simple. The idea of a proof is very systematic.
Mm-hmm.
You are trying to prove that X is Y, if this, then that, and a lot of that sort of stuff.
Right.
But it can get very complicated. Like the proof for 1 + 1 = 2 is like 32 pages long.
Interesting.
But it's very important in math because it's kind of, I know this is true. It's like, 1 + 1 is true, but you have to know, well, why is 1 + 1 2? Is like a very important thing because then it goes into bigger math concepts.
Right.
Like, I don't know if you've heard of hailstone numbers and stuff like that.
Mm-mm.
It's like, well, okay.
I won't. Okay.
So hailstone numbers is if you have, I don't remember. It's kind of just a sequence. Look it up. I don't remember the exact sequence, but the idea is that every time any number you pick starting, you'll end up with a sequence 1, 2, 5, and then it'll cycle through that.
Okay.
And this should be true for every number conceivable, technically, but no one's ever proved it.
Okay. Interesting. So what is your sort of point with that, with the math?
The interesting thing is that we've come up with different languages for math for purely functional reasons. The reason we have algebra is to kind of come up with graphs and be able to model different ideas. Calculus was for more complex ideas. You could solve a lot of the problems in calculus with algebra, but it's very difficult. So they've come up with like concepts such as integrations, derivations to find the areas of complex objects and things like that. But I wonder if in the future we'd consider doing that for like stuff like English. So say in a debate, I'd have something like a proof language in which you would do that.
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, debates are its own thing. Debates don't exist to discuss an idea. They exist
in discussions or arguments.
You ever think it's interesting? This is sort of an aside. You ever think it's interesting that in a debate, I don't know what's going on right now with you two, but in a debate, the goal is not actually to say anything about what the opponent says. It's about to just like say some stuff and get some phrases out, especially for like political debates. It's like, they'll be like, all right, so the question is, grapes good, yes or no? My opponent will tell you that ground is hard, but I've encountered a soft ground. In my political campaign, we will have more soft ground. Great. The question was about grapes. You know what I mean? Like, It's like, what are you even debating? There's no debate. So sorry, that's sort of an aside, but I was just thinking about it the other day because I saw a clip from one of the political debates, J.D. Vance and Walz, I think. And I'm like, do they ever actually address each other's arguments or the topic at hand?
I feel like that's just a long-running issue with politics in general, though.
Yeah, it's just campaigning.
It's not a recent thing.
Well, it's which one of you can say your campaign slogan's nicer. So going back to the topic of language, as we're talking about this, one of the things that it got me thinking about is the idea of the meaning of words, right? I talk to people about this a lot. Words are a lot of what we talk about societally, right, is people argue definitions, and they'll argue social issues based off of definitions. So they'll argue about the definition of or the meaning of something for the purpose of making a point of something they do or don't like, right? So without going deep into the arguments on it, it'll be like when, a common talking point now is like gender politics, right? And they say stuff like, what is a woman, right? You're a man. That's shit they'll say, right? And regardless of how you feel about it, right? This is not how language really works, right? So language works in to tell you something. The reason that words exist and the way they exist is so that you and I can talk to each other. There's a lot of crinkling going upstairs. I don't know. It's like the world's most endless crinkling experience. I don't know if the mics get it, but I can hear it, and it is endless. Anyway, sorry, I had to say it never. I was like, surely the bag it will empty at some point. Surely.
No, it will not.
It's just endless. It's the world's longest bag. Anyway, so the purpose of words, the purpose of anything is to explain something to the other person, is to communicate details. And throughout history, we have continued to use, it's the world's most endless bag. It just never stops. It is the, I can't. It's just endless. It's the biggest bag of... No, it's fine. It's fine. It's just funny to me. Okay, so the purpose of words, like the endless bag, right, is when I say that, I'm communicating a lot of things to you. I'm communicating that I'm noticing something. I'm communicating that it's gone on for a very long time. I'm communicating that seems unreasonable, right? And also that there's a humor in it. And I've expressed all this through one phrase, right? And that same thing applies to anything else. So if I tell you I'm a man, right? If I say I'm male or I'm a man, I'm communicating certain things to you. So I'm communicating generally unspoken social expectations. So there's sort of a dynamic involving me that I have described to you. I'm also describing how I represent myself. I am describing to you the way to generally refer to me to other people, right? There's a lot of assumptions you can make about me. And while people say, well, you shouldn't assume, that's simply not how societal language works.
It's not fair.
Well, it's not just not fair. It's just not how societal language works. It's not how interpersonal, right? There's the difference between definitional language, like the way you write something, and the way we communicate. And communication has to do with a lot of subtle explanations. Sorry, you look like you have a thought. Go ahead. Is it the endless bag? Is that what's going on in your head?
No. It's interesting because if you think about how people talk to each other in different societies, there's kind of, but if you go, it's like you'll see it in movies. People who are upper crust tend to talk to each other a certain way, and expect the sort of respect. But if you were to talk to your friends, they could jab and jibe it. You'd probably.
I can say the most vile things to my friends, and they just go, "Oh, you."
It's like,
yeah, but if I walked into public and said that stuff, it would be like a problem. Yeah. There's a lot of, when it comes to communication and the way we speak to each other, the way we communicate with each other, there's a lot of subtle, unspoken things. Just don't worry about it, Michael. It just doesn't matter. There's a lot of unspoken things that just don't, there's no amount of redefining our world that's going to change that, right? So when people, again, going back to, say, the gender thing, for example, and I think it's just a good one because it's literally a social argument of definitions, which is why it's a good example. And I don't really want to get into gender politics per se, but it is, the way, when you're communicating these details to someone, you're communicating those subtleties, right? You're communicating more than just this is what I identify as, or this is you're communicating how you want to be represented in society. And we can say endlessly that the sexes are equal. You know, there's that whole era in the 90s where the goal was to like eliminate all of the sort of societal differences between the sexes. That failed because it just didn't work, you know. And so you see that happen a lot online when it comes to the arguments of definitions, because the way language works. I've got another one for you, and I'd actually be interested to hear your thoughts on this one. I've talked about this recently. So without going into the topic itself, there's all this stuff happening in the Middle East right now, right? With Israel, Gaza, West Bank, Lebanon, all, you know, they're all, you know, they're all attacking except the Gazans. They're just dying. But the thing about it is every time I see there's two sides, right? And again, I don't want to go into it, but I want to talk about the definitions of things. Is what I think is interesting is the word anti-Semitic, right? So whenever I see someone say something that's anti-Zionist or anti-Israel, people then who are pro those things say that's anti-Semitic. And I go, well, what is that? From what I can tell, the implication of the way I've heard throughout my life the term anti-Semite or anti-Semitic used is it's racist plus. It's racism. You're being called a racist, but you're a racist towards Jews specifically, which is implied to be worse. That has been my observation, is that it is implied to be worse than just being called a racist. It's like, well, I may be a racist, but at least I'm not an anti-Semite, seems to be the implication.
I haven't experienced that in my life too much. But then again, I've come from a different background.
Well, I mean, I've never been called anti-Semitic, but that's like what I'm just observing it, right? And mostly more recently than ever, you know, is like you see a criticism, well, that's anti-Semitic. Well, how? They're criticizing a military action or a country's action. They're not criticizing the racial background of a person. Now, there are some people who are actually just secret Nazis who are, you know, using this as an opportunity to express their opinions. But sticking to that sort of discussion around the idea of language, that is something I noticed, and I think it's strange. It's like, what does someone mean when they say this? Now, I have actually an answer for that, but before I say it, I want to kind of hear your thoughts.
Anti-Semitism is an interesting thing because it's something that's spanned since I think Martin Luther is the major starting point when he tried to reform the churches and he tried to get Jewish people to become Christian, and then
I actually didn't know that.
I learned about this visiting the Holocaust Museum.
Oh.
So I learned that before the Holocaust and World War II and all of that stuff, everyone hated the Jews.
Oh, that's been true for a long, well, everyone's hated the Jews through most of history.
But learning like the beginnings of it was like Martin Luther tried to reform the churches. He tried to see like, hey, Jewish people, could you come to our side? And all of a sudden they said no. It's like, we don't believe Jesus was the second coming or
whatever.
whatever. And
was the Son of God.
All of a sudden there was kind of this big movement of like, we don't like people who are Jewish.
Oh, interesting.
It came along. There's more to that Jewish people could run banks because they're allowed to, I think, give loans.
Oh yeah. So that's its own thing. So a lot of the reasons that there are long-standing Jewish families in banking is because, and that Jews are associated with money specifically, comes from the fact that I don't know everything about it. I only know about like Rome and Catholicism, right? But like if you were Catholic and then you ran a bank like the Medicis did, I mean, the Medicis were accused of usury all the time by their rivals, right? Because that's charging interest to other Christians. Yeah. And you can't do that, right? How does a bank make money without interest? You know, basically investments, right? Yeah. Just investing in a product and hoping that makes money. So, you know, but loans is what banks actually really exist for, and they couldn't do that. Jews could. Jews were allowed to, right? They were allowed to do loans and make money from it. So everyone hated them because then they wanted you to pay your loan, right? Yeah. But that's why throughout the world you have a lot of Jewish, long-standing old families and old blood in the financial world. That's why that is. Now, you know, the thing about any sort of like hate that happens is usually related to something that existed, something that happened. And then what happened was actually normal. Like it wasn't a weird thing.
Oh, yeah.
But resentment builds up throughout centuries from things that weren't even maybe evil. They were just like you don't like paying the bank back a loan.
Yeah.
But you know, it's not wrong. They're not even screwing you. You agreed. They just said, okay, this much and this time period, you know, and but people still end up hating it. And then eventually they don't know what they're hating for anymore. Yeah. Right. And this happens with a lot of things. It's not just Jews. It happens with any stereotype, any, you know, any whatever like prejudice you have against a group. It started from just some behavior or something that was observed, and over time resentment built up until it was just a thing you hate.
Yeah.
And a belief you have about them, regardless of whether it's true or not.
One interesting one was a lot of Asian immigrants were kind of
the three blades.
Well, the three blades.
They're the three blades.
They were prejudiced against, not really because of anything they did, but because a group of people said they were what do you call it? They were the model immigrant.
Oh, right.
And they did that for an obvious reason, to kind of get them enemies. And some people kind of like, yeah, I'm a model, like saw that as like, yeah, I'm a model immigrant, and did not understand like why they were being used. And a lot of these Asian immigrants also were trying to help people at home, so they didn't. There was a lot of stuff that kind of combined to grow like this group hatred of Asian immigrants at that time.
That's always what it is. Any group that has some weird societal prejudice that you don't quite understand, it's because someone was using that to their advantage. They needed to create a prejudice to achieve a result, right? And that was backed up by some sort of resentment related to something else that people had. Yeah. You know, so you were able to convince people.
But getting back on topic.
Well, so getting back, I mean, I think this goes back to that topic at hand, right? Is like, what does someone mean? I have an answer to that.
I think it's just that it's been kind of seen that from World War II and a lot of just things that it's like we generally believe from World War II that the Nazis are evil.
Sure, we all agree. Well, except for neo-Nazis, they don't agree. Well, or maybe they just think they do agree, but they're like, yeah, I'm for it. I don't know. Can't get into their mind.
It is like it's like it's generally accepted. Like if
most people accept.
If someone said no, then everyone would look at them strange.
Yeah.
So the idea
Kanye West.
Yeah. But so I think that kind of made the idea of being anti-Semitic kind of look very bad.
Yeah, it became racism plus.
It became racism plus because the worst thing is like you hear anti-Semite, you think of like the worst things humans have done to a person. So that is correct. The negative image, so this goes back to like what's the meaning of a word, right? Yeah. Is what is delivered. That's the point. What is delivered with the word. When I use words, when I say a phrase, what are the series of other things or series of ideas that it conjures up in your head in response to it? By definition, right? It really is just racism plus. It's just racism. Really, it's just hyper-specific racism. Yeah. And it's become racism plus because we have decided it is somehow worse than other racism, because in your head, in most people's head, the emotional and negative reaction that is produced is somehow worse. We look at Nazis and we think those are worse than the Ku Klux Klan. That is what happens. You get a weaker emotional reaction to a group of racists than you do to a group of Nazis. And there's a historical reason for that, right? More people were affected in media by Nazis than the Ku Klux Klan, right? We know the Klan is bad. Yeah. We know racism's bad. We know a lot of things, right? But it's not as... I shouldn't say... The reason I said affected in media is because I'm not trying to say one is more affected than the other, but how often... are you hit with the Ku Klux Klan? The problem with the Ku Klux Klan for us is that it's so ingrained in American society, we're afraid to actually label it as bad because it's so
it's like this comic evil that you just are kind of like, that can't really exist. Like, you know it exists, but in your head you're like, they're so comically bad they can't be, right?
Yeah, because it's so hard to believe the place that you're in is doing such bad things. But if you look, I was like, oh, over there it's horrible. It's like, for example, the idea of a concentration camp. I believe we actually came up with that idea in America.
Did we? I mean, I know we had some.
I think it's
Because we did to the Japanese. It was France.
Oh,
okay.
was it France? Oh, okay.
Another reason to hate the French. Never miss an opportunity to hate the French. I always say.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, anyone could challenge anything we're saying because, like, there's a lot of complication here. Like, racism is a big issue throughout history in America, but I think that people have become somewhat desensitized to it. It's such a constant topic. Mm-hmm. Nazis are a constant topic too, but they're a constant villain. They're a villain in everything. They're a villain in major films. They're a villain in a million video games. You are constantly reminded that the Holocaust happened and was bad. There was a clear good guy and a bad guy, and you never forget that. But when we talk about racism, it's usually in art films or films that are just like trying to make you feel sad. So like when you see Nazis and anti-Semitism in media, unless you're watching Schindler's List, you're mostly going to be hit with war and heroes and bad guys, and it's clear who the evil bad guy is, and you feel that and you think it and you hate them and it feels good to hate them. But whenever
it's interesting because it's the same thing that the Nazis are doing,
right? But when you deal with racism, right, just general racism, especially in America, it's always sad, it's always harmful, you want to look away, right? So there's an innate sort of like emotional block that you put up when dealing with that. So then when we go back to the words, right, those words are trying to invoke something, and what they invoke is stronger and you align more with than the other one. People throw around racist all the time, but people also ignore it all the time, right?
I think one thing that really makes me happy though in regards to racism is when people,
I get so happy
is that when people actually see what is like, when people is like, all they may think a certain way, but when they see the effects of how people are treated, they are actually repelled.
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting. I forgot where it was, but there was some information I read. I don't know if it was a study or what, but it showed that prejudice rarely survives prolonged exposure. So the more you interact with something that you have a strong negative opinion of, the harder it is to hold on to that, right? So it's really easy to hate someone you never see, but it's hard to hate them if they're just being normal in your space. Eventually you just kind of go, well, it's where the term, one of the good ones for racists come from, right? Yeah. Like where the racists will say that, it's like, well, it's because in their head, they have to like justify that they have this like mode of thought. Yeah. But then they've got all these examples of like where that's not the case. Yeah. Well, there's a difference is what they justify.
I think I shared with you a video of a guy who did not understand racism. He was a black man who went to like a Ku Klux Klan wizard. It's funny.
Yeah, they call themselves wizards.
He went to
cast a spell.
He went to a wizard, and he became his best friend.
He's going to cast meth addiction.
He became his best friend. And eventually the guy gave him his robes.
Oh, you're talking about Daryl Davis.
Yeah.
Yeah, Daryl Davis's like whole thing is meeting Klan members and convincing them that, but through friendship, that maybe their worldview is wrong.
It's like he just talks to them.
Just talks to them, yeah. Yeah, and a lot of anti-racists hate Daryl Davis because they're not actually anti-racist. They're racists themselves, but they want to be racist against who they perceive as the one you're allowed to be racist against. So a lot of people, I don't know what to call them, but they're like some of the more extreme people who preach Black Lives Matter and stuff. They've said very hateful things about Daryl Davis because he believes that convincing people to change their ways through love and friendship is good and correct. They hate him for that because they themselves are actually evil.
Which is a shame.
It is a shame.
Because one of my childhood heroes was Martin Luther King. And
yeah. And the FBI killed him. They just said it. Isn't that crazy? They just like, oh yeah, no, we did that. That's wild. That's an interesting thing that goes back to language, though. Conspiracies. When people use the term conspiracy theory, they use it to be dismissive, right? So when and again, why do they do that? Because the government convinced everyone that the term, they use propaganda to convince you that the phrase conspiracy theory meant non-credible thing that crazy people do. So they would depict people like that guy in Stranger Things, right? It's like, the FBI are bugging my house and I got to wear a tinfoil hat so they don't read my mind, right? Like that's the kind of guy they show you because they want to convince you that any conspiracy theory is not real. That because it's a conspiracy theory, it's unfounded and ungrounded.
Another term, crazy people.
Crazy people, yeah.
What makes a person crazy?
Yeah, what defines a person as being crazy? Exactly. But that's the way the rhetoric works, right? But a conspiracy theory is just a theory of people conspiring to do something. And we're conspiring right now. When we met earlier to get this set up, we were conspiring to do a podcast, right? So if you didn't know that we were doing that and you had a theory of what we were up to, well, they're taking a bunch of cameras and microphones over there. Maybe they're going to set up some sort of show. You'd have a theory that we are conspiring to start some sort of show.
And you know what? Yeah. They're probably right.
They're a crazy person.
And that too.
So, the language is about communicating a series of ideas, and people manipulate that to achieve the results, which goes back to what I was saying before, is that why does someone say this is anti-Semitic when someone criticizes something or says that's racist? It's because actually they're not actually concerned whether that thing is or is not that. It's they don't like what you said, they don't agree with it, and they need to quickly remove credibility from it. So by throwing this idea, it's anti-Semitic, it's racist.
You're crazy.
It's a conspiracy theory. They're quickly dismissing that thing because now you no longer can make your argument. Instead, you have to defend against the accusation to bring back credibility. Which is why the correct response when people do that is to just go, okay, whatever, insert thing. So when someone calls me racist, I just call them racist. And they don't know what to do about that. Right? Well, no, you're a racist because you said that you're racist. And they go, I'm not racist. I go, of course you are. Otherwise, you wouldn't have said it. No, you're the racist. I go, well, that's racist. They don't know what to say, right? Because they're not interested in having a reasonable argument. And because it's now just a rhetorical game.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about language, is that language is a tool. And we've started treating it as sort of like a fact, a ruler, a king. That the language matters more. We talked about that with insults. I saw it the other day. This is a good one, actually. This is one because I have said for years that banning words is bad. Banning words in our language. I don't just mean but I mean when we intercommunicate, right? And if you say that, the first response people say is, oh, you just really want to say the N-word, don't you? I said, no, if I wanted to, I would just say it. That's not the issue. I have massive testicles. I'm not afraid to say things I want to say. I don't have a strong desire to say it. The point is that whenever you ban a word, you give it power. And when it has power, people will use it against you. People go, no, when you ban a word, you get rid of it. I go, okay, well, I said this 10 years ago. So now Elon Musk owns Twitter, and on Twitter, you're allowed to be racist so long as it's against people, so long as you're right wing, right? And you have a thought, but I just want to make this point and then go ahead. The other day, someone criticized Obama and then called him the N-word. And there was like hundreds of replies saying followed, agreed, posting pictures of monkeys. And I go, for 10 years, people have told me that that banning bad words was how you solve the problem. Now that they're allowed to do it, they're in a certain place, they're just doing it. It never worked, never solved anything.
Because people just use different words. It's like...
Well, and then they started using the word again as soon as they could get away with it. Because the reality is the word still has power in their mind.
Well, because, again, language is an invented thing. It's like... It's not like I'm banning swords in my room or whatever. I'm just banning the word swords. You can bring a sword still.
Yeah, you still have it. You just don't say it. Don't show it to me.
You're not allowed to say the word though.
Well, it's kind of like how when you, it's a good metaphor is also a real world thing is in our state, you can open carry a gun, right, without a license. But to carry it concealed, you need a license. But if you have it concealed, no one will bother you. But if you have it out in the open, cops will stop you, which is illegal, to find out why you're walking around with a gun. But they don't have to, because having a gun on display that you are legally allowed to own is not enough precedent for a cop to approach you or stop you. I mean, they can always legally talk to you, but you can just walk away. But if they detain you, they've committed a crime, which they get away with because cops are first-class citizens in the United States. But that's the same sort of metaphor, right? It's like, well, if you don't say it, you can have it.
Yeah.
But if you say it, now it's a problem, right?
I think it's interesting because I remember as a child, the words like fuck, shit, and that sort of stuff, it's like were considered so horrible to say. And then when I grew up, it's like everyone says
it. Everyone says it. It's like a lie we tell children. Once you cross a certain threshold, now you're allowed to say it, and now they have no meaning. They only have meaning before that threshold.
Yeah. As a child, it's like, oh, you said that word.
Oh my God, you're powerful. It's like you cast a spell.
Yeah, and it's interesting because if you, where am I going with this?
Where are you going with this? Well, I not to stop you, but this same thing can be applied to certain insults about intelligence, right? So I have the perfect example. Oh my God, I sent this today. Okay. You know how people get mad at me for saying retarded, right?
I was actually thinking.
Yeah. No, but hold on. So I said, well, what words are allowed? Well, dumb and stupid are allowed. But dumb and stupid are both former medical terms that were eventually turned into insults, and then were no longer used as medical terms because they were used as insults.
Yeah. And retard is an interesting word because it means less than it could be.
Oh, sure.
It's an interesting.
But today, so what I've always said is every day, every time you come up with a term, someone is going to decide that they don't like that term, right? And they're going to tell you you're not allowed to say that. And so then eventually that becomes a bad word. You're going to give it power because now it's a bad word, right? And then eventually it's going to become so used that it's going to lose its meaning, and we're going to find something new, right? So because you're going to go, okay, I'm not allowed to say retarded, so I'm going to say clinically insane, or I'm going to say brain dead, or I'm going to say
dunce.
Clinically. One I saw today was like clinically brain damaged, I think was the one that someone used, and someone said, wow, you used that as a negative term. That's pretty fucked up, right? Because I saw this was an actual argument, to which the person replied, okay, retard. but I saw that. I sent that to Brock and Lucas because that is the argument I've been making. Is I say, okay, I say brain damaged, right? I say, okay, I'm not allowed to say retarded. I'll say brain damaged. So I call people brain damaged. Well, one day someone's going to go, well, being brain damaged is a real condition. You shouldn't say that. Okay, so now we're going to do this. So here's dumb and here's retarded. You're allowed to say dumb, you're allowed to say retarded. And here's stupid. Stupid has almost no value. We're going to just slide these down, and then we're going to move brain damaged into retarded space. And I'm going to find a new thing I can say, right? Now I'm going to say skull broken, right? You know what I mean? And for a while, that's going to be fine until one day someone decides that. And that's the ever-evolving sort of insult.
We're just adding more things to the English language.
We're adding more things that you're not allowed to say that eventually you'll be allowed to say again because they don't actually mean anything, right? They just are a general insult, right? That is what I'm talking about giving words power, right? Is you're just giving them power, and now I can use it to harm you. Like if I know something, it's like that guy, he replied, okay, retard, right? Yeah. That guy revealed to the other guy, I am bothered by this. Oh, well, I don't like you. So now I know exactly what to say to upset you. Thank you.
Yeah. It also reminds me of another thing. I didn't know much as a kid. I didn't know the middle finger meant something.
Oh yeah, me neither. I used to point with my middle finger.
Yeah, and it's like people said you should hold up your middle finger, and I did it. It was like,
yeah, sure, why not?
Was like, They said, what are you doing? I was like, what are you? Are you stupid? What? I was like,
I don't know. It's my fingy. I got 5 fingies.
I was like,
This is the middle one.
It was like they couldn't explain to me why it was bad because they didn't know. So
But they also knew that you couldn't do it.
They also knew I couldn't do it. It was like, what?
Yeah, it is very, very interesting. And that's what I think is interesting about language is everything only has the meaning we give it.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it only has the meaning we give it. And so when people argue definitions, oftentimes they're arguing the emotional position rather than like it's a tool. As you mentioned earlier, language is a tool. Like you did with math, we've invented these mathematic languages. It's a tool.
Yeah.
Right? Language is a tool. And, wrapping back around to the beginning idea, everything is a tool for communication. And you're trying to communicate certain things. And as we make that harder to do by banning things, by making things either too ambiguous or, it's like when we talked about gender, right? Earlier in the conversation, there is a value to having, because there's the gender abolitionists, right? They want to get rid of it. All the ideas around it. So, well, if you do that, you're not actually going to get rid of it. People are going to find new ways of communicating the same details. Yeah. Right? It's used for something. Right? These definitions are used for something. You may create more words, you may create a new phrase or something, but you're always going to reinvent a way to communicate the same information. So getting rid of it doesn't actually solve anything. And then people will say, oh, well, these things have a defined definition. Well, words have changed their definition, as we just discussed about insults, throughout history.
One great one is perverted, because perverse means away from law, but we have a more specific.
Yeah, I definitely don't think about the law when I think about perversion.
Yeah, it's like perversion is a more specific thing. It's towards like you have something sick about you, or you're like.
Even then, people really just mean sexual now.
Yeah, people usually mean sexual.
In fact, it's lost a lot of its negative meaning. Now, being a pervert is something you say, quietly to your partner when you want to do sexy things, Oh yeah, I'm a real pervert. I love fat asses. It's the thing people would say as if nobody likes,
I'm interested if people like reading it in a book are surprised. It's like this perverse body is like mangled or whatever.
You've had this nearly fucked up piece of toilet paper. I don't know what that is.
It's paper towel.
Why do you have a paper towel?
Because I like
You've had it the whole time. Do you need to get you a fidget spinner?
That's what I was trying to tell you to throw away.
I mean, it's fine. It doesn't matter. It's just now I'm seeing you spin it around. I'm like, what is going on right now? I thought you had to blow your nose or something, but you never did it. It's wild. You can have it. I don't care. I'm not going to stop you.
I threw it on the floor.
Viewers aren't going to judge you. The viewers will judge you, but they can't hurt you. I mean, they might in the comments, but I don't care. I don't read the comments.
I think I'm the only one who's commented so far.
Good. Yes. You should insult yourself. That's an opportunity.
I'll do that.
But yes, perversion, pervert.
I'm interested to see, because a lot of these words are used in books in different ways, because as you've mentioned, perverse means specifically something sexual.
Nowadays, yeah.
But when I was thinking about how it's used in a lot of books, and it's not quite used that way all the time.
No. In fact, it's kind of funny. People use the word sex pervert as a joke, but that's actually the correct phrase, because if you don't use the word sex, technically you're not using the word pervert or perversion correctly. But if you call someone a pervert in at least American language, American common language, they're going to assume something sexual. No one's going to think that you're a weird pervert about gardening.
Yeah.
And if you do, then they're going to think, oh, does he fuck the dirt? And they're like, no, actually, they just mean like he just does it wrong. He just does it in a weird way that's like not right. Yeah. The perverted gardener has one tree that he has grafted one branch from every fruit tree on because he thinks it's funny. And they're like, does he fuck the tree? No.
No.
But you said he was a pervert.
He's like. The funny thing about language is you can't force any of these things, so someone must have come up with these ideas.
People try to force language all the time, and it never works. It doesn't work.
It's the same with memes.
Oh yeah, you can't force a meme.
Oh, one thing I was actually thinking of, which reminds me a lot of memes, is have you seen that Star Trek The Next Generation episode where the captain tries to contact another group of people, and they only talk in terms of stories.
I've not seen this.
I forget what
I probably did when I was young, but I don't remember.
it's
it.
like. They have this ceremony. They put two people on one planet. The alien captain, in a last ditch effort, because it's like we had a horrible time trying to understand what the hell they were saying. So he said, put us both on this fucking planet. We can only communicate with each other, and there's an enemy we both have to fight. And so he keeps saying like Takunda comes between two mountains, whatever. And it's like, of course, our captain's like, what the fuck are you saying?
It's like, what's going on? I don't know what this being said.
The interesting thing is it's like memes. It's like saying skibbity toilet over and over again.
Skibbity toilet, dude.
It's because like, if I said that to someone who's just out of the loop, there's like, I don't even understand it. But if you said it to like,
nobody understands it. That's why it's funny.
I'm sure there's someone who understands.
Here's the thing. Do you know what? There's a lot, because there's that song where they made a bunch of, oh, hey, that light went off, which is good. I wonder if it's out of power, or if I'm just going to be in the dark from now on.
Dark.
Oh, yeah, it's not plugged in. It's fine. Oh, no, it turned back. Oh, no, it doesn't have power. That's fine. I'll just be in the dark. It's fine. Consider this dark Kevin. Now I'm going evil mode. I'm going to say some slurs.
Okay.
So the thing is that I'm gonna say it now. So the thing is, there was that song that was making fun of like all the like sort of like Zoomer slang, where they just like throw the word Sigma around and Rizzler and sticking out your giat for the Rizzler, like that became a meme. In there they mentioned phantom tax. Do you know what that is?
No.
You don't? Nobody does. You want to know why? You have to be a Kaisenat watcher. It doesn't mean anything. The phantom is just one of Kaisenat's friends that is part of his show, is part of that crew, because before he was a streamer, they were like a YouTube channel. They were like a crew of people. And the tax is Phanom runs in and steals some of his food. Whenever Kai gets food, the Phanom tax is Phanom runs in and steals some of it. And that's a meme.
So like the dad tax.
Kind of like the dad tax or the girlfriend tax is the Phanom tax, right? So when he mentions it in that meme song, it literally means nothing. It's just saying a phrase. At least sticking out your giat for the Rizzler means like sticking out your ass for like, the charismatic person, right? But just saying phantom tax doesn't even make sense in the sentence of the song making fun of it.
Yeah.
So everyone's just like, what the fuck does that mean? God, these words make no sense. You're right. That one is purely contextual compared to all the other phrases said in that time. Because we already know what Riz is. So if you say Rizzler, well, you're just talking about a person who's called the Rizzler. Because he's got Riz, Like, that's very interesting. Because that's language, right? It doesn't make any sense. And I knew you wouldn't, because who does? Who would have known that? I didn't know. I Googled it.
Google knew.
Google knew. Well, actually, DuckDuckGo knew. You know what's funny? Googling something is near useless now. Don't open up Google. Open up DuckDuckGo. You open up Google and search for something, you get something from 6 years ago for an outdated version of whatever you're trying to figure out on a Microsoft help page that hasn't been responded to. But you go to DuckDuckGo and you look it up and you get the first response is that. It's an actual search engine that works and doesn't steal your data in the process. When you look up big hentai tits, it doesn't record that.
Really?
Yeah. Unlike Google, who are like, he loves big hentai tits. Find big hentai tits, post it everywhere. So language is interesting like that. And I think going back to, the original idea of evolving languages, you can actually just look at it by slang. What stuck?
Swagger.
Swag and swagger, yeah.
It came from Shakespeare. Shakespeare has that where I was like, when I saw it first in a Shakespearean story, I was like, oh wow.
Yeah, wow. That's crazy. Yeah, it's language is ever evolving, but no matter what you do, whenever you get rid of something or ban something or change something, something has to take its place, right? And the thing that will stick around will always be the thing that best produces the result you're looking for with the least effort. So whenever you're talking about anything, the things people are gonna, it's like, oh, what was that series of memes? It was like bro did, so it's like you say something to your friend, so he's like, yeah, I went to the store, bro's shopping. You know that meme of the two like white figures sitting next to each other?
Oh.
And the guy goes, bro's shopping, and the other guy's just like, and now whenever I say something to my friends, anything, they'll say bro's blank. And what does that mean? It just means they're acknowledging what I'm saying without really saying anything. You know, there's nothing else to say, so they say something. So they invoke that joke, right? And that's language. Where is it going to go? Probably nowhere. It's probably just going to continue. I think if you look at the past 100 years of language, what I think will happen is a centralization. So more and more and more, you're going to see an understanding become more narrow, right? You know, you can look at it with America and Japan. The more time goes on as we become more interconnected, Americans love Japanese stuff. The Japanese, despite what they might say, love to consume American products, American media, American things. Yeah. More and more and more people are adopting jokes, humors, and understandings from Japanese media, and the Japanese are doing it with U.S. stuff. There are a number of things, like if you went to Japan 60 years ago, they would be super confused by the foreigner behavior, unless they've met them before. Nowadays, when you go there, they go, that's just American. There's that guy who goes, I forgot what he's called, but people colloquially in Japan call him like the angel of whatever the district is. And it's because all the women in that district know. He's just a streamer who walks around Japan. But if they're in trouble, they can run up to him and he'll like pretend that he knows them so that whoever's bothering them will go away. You can see videos of it online. He's just this white guy who just like moved to Japan. He just streams on Twitch, but now he has a nickname in Japan for being the guy that like women can be out at the bars. And if they got a weird guy following them, they can't get some dudes to leave them alone, they can like go up to him if they see him and he'll just pretend to know them. And since he's live streaming, people just walk away.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Because they don't want to, they don't know what to do. That's not something you could have had a long time ago, and that's what I mean is like there's these sort of coming together that's sort of happening thanks to the internet.
It reminds me of a lot of the idea of Americanization, wearing jeans and stuff like that. A lot of countries seem to dislike this idea at first.
I think you'll find that people will always do what ends up working for them, right? So some will say, I don't like it. Oh, well, it's Americanization. It's being forced on us. Is it being forced on you, or are you adopting it because it benefits you, right? A lot of the clothing people wear is always, you ask yourself, when you're chilling and there's no pressure on you, what do you wear?
Sweatpants.
Exactly. Guess what? That's true of most countries that have access to sweatpants. No one told them they had to do it. Yeah. No one in Japan who has the option between putting on some sort of traditional robe or sweatpants, who puts on the sweatpants, did it because someone said, if you don't put on the sweatpants,
I'm going to shoot you.
I'm going to shoot you. They did it because it works. It works for them.
It's very nice, too.
And that's how culture is. That's how language is. People are always going to eventually, when the pressure is off, they're simply going to do what works out best for them.
And jeans are very nice, too.
They're convenient and easy. They're long-lasting. They are more insulated than other things. They're, like I said, they're rugged, and they're prevalent and available. Denim is very easy to turn into a lot of different sizes, There's a reason that denim ends up everywhere. So do you have any other thoughts about any of this? I kind of, I could go on and on and on, but this was your topic. I don't know if it really achieved the result you were looking for.
I think it went around the same. It went around where I thought it would go. One thing I was interested in it. Well, we might have already went over that, but like today, how if we compare Old English to now, it will be completely. Yep, it is. It seems like completely different language. Do we think that'll happen the same in like 100 years?
Oh, absolutely. I think you'll be able to understand it casually. If you were to go 100 years in the future, you'd be able to generally understand it. You'd also be very confused by it, right? Because new slang, new terminology, new ways of using words that have a definition. I mean, when you look at just the way we use words now compared to 100 years ago, we understand them in both contexts, but it's confusing. It's confusing, but I understand. I'm like, I get it, but weird when you look at something from 100 years ago.
Yeah. Once in April, whatever.
Interestingly enough, a lot of the language people, Mike might be able to comment on this more. A lot of the times when we talk about ye old English, it's not actually like we try to think that it's going to be some weird Shakespearean shit, and they're going to say
But that's the written stuff.
But that's not how they actually spoke. They spoke more like how we do now, but just with different words. Yeah. Think about jail and jowl, right? Gaol is just jail. It's just jail. It's the same word. It's not goal. But we don't realize that, right? Because of how we're reading it in the written format versus like we can't travel back in time and go talk to a farmer who's actually just saying, hey, man.
Yeah. But hopefully now that we do have videos and stuff like that and a bunch of people just putting shit on TikTok, we have a bunch of just references.
I hope TikTok is not a reference for the future. I find it to be truly, even I'm confused when I go on TikTok and watch someone just going into the camera. I'm like, what am I fucking looking at? And why does it have 6 million views? I don't get it away from me.
Listen, but unfortunately, I feel like TikTok is going to be used as a major reference.
And this is why I will die on purpose before that is true.
Because as much as I hate it, they have so much shit on there. It's hard not.
This is why this is the curse of immortality, right? If I am made to be immortal as a punishment, it'll be so I can see what happens when TikTok is used as a reference for history, and we see. This was a ritualistic facial expression process used by ancient humans. We believe it was to find a mate. I hate it. And that's not even, I don't hate TikTok, by the way, to hate TikTok. I don't like TikTok because I actually just don't enjoy it. I've tried and I don't get it. It's like the worst way to consume media. I don't like shorts either.
I was against TikTok because on its inception it was very heavily algorithmically pushed to just bully children.
Oh, interesting. I always see it as sort of just like a bad thing for the health of humanity. And I don't mean health moralistically. I mean attention span, right? When you look at, that it would baffle someone today to watch a video of Harry Houdini doing a trick. Because he used to convince an audience to sit for 45 minutes staring at a wall to set up his trick, right? And they would do it just for the wow of the trick. You can't get someone to pay attention. This video is too long for most people. This podcast is too long for most viewers, right? At 20 minutes, people want to turn stuff off. And that's people who enjoy long form, right? I think that's artificial, because I think ADHD is real. I've talked about this. I have ADHD, right? And I have had it my whole life. But I think that there's sort of an artificial ADHD that's been created by stimulus, right? So we're used to getting these rapid dopamine hits that have created this way your brain responds to stimuli to quickly give up as soon as the stimuli is not reached within like 7 seconds.
That's interesting because on the inception of books, well, I don't know if I won't say this TikTok is the same as the inception of books, but when books were first being mass produced, there was this fear that we'd lose our ability to memorize things, and that's, at least for me, it's true.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty good at memorization. Well, what I'm good at, I'm not good at memorization. I'm good at memorizing a concept. So like if you show me something, I can absorb all the information and remember what the point of that was. But if you ask me to like regurgitate verbatim information,
I think that's
I've
what
never
they
been
mean.
able to do that.
I think that's what they mean.
That's interesting.
Because it's like I believe it's like before people were supposed to be able to like recite the entire Bible, just write it down. There are people who are meant to just do that, but
I do question though, because maybe that's true, but the question is,
was it useful?
well, let's say that did happen. That most people can't memorize stuff now, but if we were to go back in time, if we were to have every person memorize information, would they actually memorize it, or was it actually just that there was a few people who could do it, and everyone else had to rely on those people because they actually never had the skill? Because we do notice that general education, general knowledgeability has gone up with the ability to record information. The more readily accessible information was, the more the average education level of a population is.
Yeah.
So that begs the question, is it actually that we've had a decline of memorization, or is it there was always only some people who could do it and everyone else, and those people probably didn't remember everything. How many things were lost simply because they eventually forgot something,
Or they misremembered something. It's an interesting thing because we'll never be able to do.
Because I do think that's a little bit different from this example of like having patience. Having patience is the ability to just sit and wait and not be upset that you had to do so, right? Which people don't have as much anymore. And it's because we sit down and we've got children and their brains are developing and we hand them an iPad and you get that image of that kid going like this, flipping through TikTok on one device, doing like a cookie clicker on the other. You know what I mean? Like, and it's like there's this constant stimuli, and that's going to affect the development of the brain and the way that it reacts to dopamine hits. And I think that's probably not healthy. But that has very little to do with language. Do you have anything else?
No.
No? All right. Well, this was actually a really good discussion to me because it touched on some subjects that I have mused about. Hopefully, if you've made it to the end, you have enjoyed it. If you are one of our like 4 viewers, I think it's like 20 viewers, but that's not the point. If you are one of those people and you have any thoughts about any of this, please post in the comments. I will actually read it. I lied earlier because I do that and I'm evil. And Mansor will definitely read it because he actually comments. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. And Mansor, thank you so much for the topic today.
Yeah, thank you.
I look forward to next week. And to our guests, thank you. Thank you for your explanation earlier. It was useful. And Mike, as always, thank you for your silent but present operation.
I have to apologize to France. It was Spain.
Damn it! I lost a reason to hate France.
I hate you for that.
We'll leave on that. Thank you and see you next time.
Bye.